it looks like we have everyone joining us here, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. First of all, I guess welcome everyone to our Tuesday night Zoom cast. What I understand is episode number 53. Looking forward to having a good discussion here over the course of the next hour or so. Our guest panelists tonight, first and foremost, is Keith Barrett. He is our Vice President of the Youth Council and Chairman of the Youth Council for USA Hockey. He's also been a longtime official, I think 17 plus years, and been involved on the coaching side and every other aspect of USA Hockey for a long time as well. And then our other panelist is Kristen Wright, who is our manager of our female player development as part of the ADM program, so to speak. Also a longtime official, a longtime coach, and certainly been very active in these types of issues on the girls women's side for a long time, and hopefully will or I know will contribute quite a bit to the discussion as well tonight. So welcome Keith and Kristen. As a quick reminder is if you do have any questions that come up throughout the evening or throughout the session, please use the Q&A section, and we'll try to monitor those questions that come in and try to incorporate them into the discussion. And very much, again, looking forward to a pretty good session tonight, talking about the hockey community and where it fits into a bigger picture in regards to the environment that's created for youth hockey officials and youth hockey players and the whole hockey environment as a whole. So with that in mind, as you know, we generally start out each session with a quick poll. So I have 5 questions prepared for you that I'm going to launch right now. If you could take a minute or two to go ahead and answer each one of the 5 questions and take your time, think through it a little bit. And when you get down to the bottom and have answered all 5, you'll get a chance to submit. And then once we give everyone a couple of minutes to do that real quick, we shall take a look at the results and we'll get the program started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the polling, and we will share the results and go over them real quickly. Okay, so question number 1, how would you rate the overall quality of youth hockey officiated in the United States? 25% say good, 58% satisfactory, 17% needs improvement, with 0 coming in at poor. So I guess that's a good thing, and looks like roughly about 80%, 83% are satisfied, and we also, I think, realize that there's still some work to do. Question number 2, how would you rate the overall youth hockey culture in creating a fun and rewarding experience for officials? 17% said good, 25% satisfactory, 50% needs improvement, and 8%, 2 out of the 24, indicated that the overall youth hockey culture was poor. So again, I think, and as we go through, I think the session tonight, you understand why we're asking these types of questions and where it fits into some of the direction that USA Hockey is trying to go here. Question number 3, what do you think is the main reason for a shortage of officials? 54% indicate the abuse from teams and spectators, 8% low pay, 8% lack of game assignments or opportunity to advance, 17% the registration requirements. 1 person indicated it's simply not fun anymore, and a couple that use the other category. Question number 4, acknowledging there is a shortage of officials, which of the following best describes your feelings regarding registration education requirements by USA Hockey? So 13%, it's a good balance of time commitment and the educational quality. 29%, the education component is important, but efforts should continue to streamline the process. 29%, the education is necessary. I understand USA Hockey does not have any control over safe sport and screening. 13%, USA Hockey requires too much commitment from the officials to become registered, and eliminating some of the requirements will make it more attractive for more officials. 13%. Eliminating some of the requirements will increase the number of officials, but I'm concerned we will also sacrifice some quality of officiating to do so. And once again, another that we go back and we can take a look at the chat real quick and see what that is. And finally, question number 5, do you think USA Hockey should have an enforceable zero tolerance policy for spectators and coaches? And an overwhelming 96%, 23 out of 24 said yes. And for the person that said no, I'm very happy that your area seems to have this under control and is a positive experience there. So that's results. Thank you very much. We do take that feedback very important. It is something that is used for us. And just a couple things from the chat. Under question number 3, continued training and support for younger new officials, too often thrown in and have to make it on their own too much. Totally agree with that. And you know, we need to emphasize the mentor program. And regarding the 4th question, there has been an utter lack of mentorship and guidance of new young referees in our club. Nor has there been available information on how to grow as a young official. Absolutely agree, and some very good points there, and very much hits the target. So with that being said, before we get started here, Keith and Kristen, anything stand out for you, or any thoughts you have in regards to what we just learned from the poll questions?
Kristen, I'm going to default to you.
I think it's interesting that the zero tolerance was overwhelming. It's a topic that we've discussed a lot, and what zero tolerance looks like and how it is enforceable. So that stood out to me, and it's something that we've discussed quite a bit. So I'd like to hear the feedback there.
First off, thank you, Matt, for asking Kristen and I to join you this evening. A lot to talk about here, and I laughed when Kristen said that, because that was actually my number one, 96% on an enforceable zero tolerance. And you know, I say enforceable because we do have a zero tolerance policy, and I don't think it's enforced. I think that the officials need to use it more, but not only do the officials need to use it more, we're hoping that the administrators within their leagues also back up the officials on the zero enforcement policy. So that's the zero tolerance policy. The enforcement side is big. I know we'll talk about the task force here shortly, but that is definitely one of the areas that we're looking at, is that enforceability aspect of the zero tolerance. So I was also struck by the question number 4. Pretty even percentages across the board on what some of the remedies could be, to make this a little more attractive. But I think for the most part, the questions were good questions, and I know you asked us for those questions, and we developed those to try to get an understanding. So task force is going to take these questions and put it to work. So thank you.
Okay, off to a great start. Okay, first question I have, I'll start with you, Kristen. When we first posted this Zoomcast topic, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that were wondering the title, well, hockey community, where exactly are they going to go with that? It's certainly outside of the framework of what our typical or normal Zoomcast topic may be. When you hear the phrase hockey community, what comes to your mind, and what do you think it entails?
Yeah, Matt, I was surprised to even be asked on the Zoomcast. Though I'm part of the officiating task force, I'm an official. It's just, then I saw the topic and I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Something we talk about a lot is that hockey community. And for me, it comes down to family, the family of people around the rink, whether it's the coaches, the officials, the volunteers, the hockey director, the rink owner, right? The family that's around everyone to create the best player experience possible. Right? Whether it's youth hockey or adult hockey, that's the whole point of the game, right? It's a really great positive experience for everyone on the ice during the games and during practices. Since we're talking about officiating, it's definitely going to be during games. And I think we need to take a bigger focus on it being a family, that everybody's involved to create any sort of changes going forward with some of the topics that we had already asked in the poll questions.
Okay, Keith, your thoughts on what does the phrase hockey community mean to you?
Well, it's easy for me to sit back and say, Kristen nailed it. That's it right there. But she did nail it. And, for me, I don't want to echo exactly what she said, but, it depends on where you sit in your hockey community. If you're the coach, if you're a player, if you're a family member for a player on that team, that's your community. I don't think they realize that it's much bigger than that. And I say that because after a number of years of coaching, a number of years as being a local administrator, it really wasn't until I got involved with the regional and district and the national level that I realized, well, I tell you what, this hockey community is much bigger than I ever thought it would be. And it is the players, it's the coaches, it's the administrators, it's the officials, it's all the people that you deal with, that we deal with in Colorado Springs, behind the scenes, so to speak. There's so many people in this hockey community, but I have to agree wholeheartedly with Kristen when she said that it's a family and we're trying to create a positive experience for everybody. And that's what we're trying to do, not only for the players, but for coaches, for the officials, especially on this call, and for everybody else, the administrators alike.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen here again, real quick. And Keith, it's going to kind of sort of lead you into the next question. Obviously, most people are probably aware of the shortage of officials many areas are experiencing, and we also recognize it is not exclusive to ice hockey. Same things are happening in other youth sports in the high school federation for sure, in all of their sports. The good news for USA Hockey is that our numbers appear to be trending close to pre-pandemic numbers. We just closed our registration yesterday, actually, and we got within 95%, which mirrors where the players are at as it relates to officials registration, player registration for the 2019-2020 season, which is pre-pandemic. But I think the other thing that we learned through this process is that the pandemic probably only accelerated reaching the crisis mode much sooner. I think looking back, we saw this coming. We saw that that this was going to be coming or happening at some point where we would enter into a crisis mode in regards to the number of officials. And I really believe that COVID probably accelerated that by a couple of years. And that's where we're at, where we are today. So as a result of that, USA Hockey's president, Mike Strimboli, appointed a task force to address the officiating issue. And as chairman of that task force, Keith, can you go ahead and talk a little bit about what that task force has been charged to do? And also we'll kind of sort of give some details in regards to who's involved. Sure.
Thanks, Matt. I think just to take a half a step back, you're right. We did see this coming. We saw it coming down the pipe a while ago that there was going to be this shortage. And yes, the pandemic did throw it into overdrive and accelerated the process somewhat. I think what kind of concerns me is, yeah, we hit our numbers or pretty close to it, 95% on the registration this year. But the other side of the equation is the grow the game, the emphasis that we've had on growing hockey. We have more clubs playing, we have more players playing, we have more coaches out there. So there's a drastic need for more games, but of course more officials. So it's definitely the perfect storm, which has been exacerbated obviously by the pandemic. The task force came about really with games that are going black, so to speak, not having two officials. Some games having one official, some games having no officials, games being canceled. Couple that, I believe, with some unwanted press, abuse of officials. So Mike Strimboli, myself, Bob Joyce from the Mass District, as well Bob Mancini from the hockey department sort of had a conversation to say, I think we need to sort of peel away the onion and find out, what the nexus is behind some of these problems that we're seeing. And, maybe we can come up with some fixes for this. So the task force was stood up, and really it was the officiating task force. And there was a lot of questions on what exactly we were going to be doing. And, there was like a veil of secrecy behind it. There wasn't. I think our main charge really is, we use the term culture. And, we want to have a positive culture, as Kristen had indicated in the previous question. We really want to have mutual respect from all parties within the hockey community. We want to have mutual respect between officials and players, officials and coaches, coaches and players, fans, spectators, family members, whoever in the stands, to both players and officials, as well as the coach. Because I've been in rinks, I think we've all been in rinks where, you hear that comment from, Mr. or Mrs. Jones against maybe another player, or probably the coach of that player's team. So it's not just all directed at officials. I think it's just, trying to, refocus everybody on it's a game. A lot of these young officials that we have on the ice are just that. They're young officials that are learning, they're honing their skills to try to become a better official, become a higher level official, maybe to make a career out of it someday. It's not unusual, but yes, some guys do and girls do make pretty decent money, whether it be full or part-time officiating hockey games. So that's sort of where the nexus of the whole task force started, when Mike called us up and said, what are your thoughts? What do you think? This is what we put together. And there's there's only 12 of us on the task force, and yes, Kristen is on the task force. We wanted a couple staff members on the task force that play an integral role, both on the officiating side or the coaching side. So you'll see the names of the individuals that are on this task force, and they're made up of people that may be in your backyard that you may know, that if you have an issue, if you have concerns, if you have something that you think needs to be vetted, you should contact this person and get a hold of them and have that conversation. Because we meet weekly, we meet for 1 hour every week, and we discuss. I would tell you, it's probably some of the best hockey conversations that I've had in a very long time. We're drilling in, we're trying to come up with solutions, and there's no sunset date on this task force. Now, not that I want to do this every week for the next 2 years, but what I'm trying to say is we're going to try to come up with some low-hanging fruit, some immediate changes that could be made this season as the season goes on, either through recommendations or a presidential directive from Mike Trimboli. And then I think going into annual Congress in the summertime, what can we do to make changes going into next year? Or what kind of changes do we need to do for rule changes that may take place in 3 years from now? So we'll have a way to get to the Playing Rules Committee and provide them with some information. I think it's going to be a long, holistic look at exactly what we want from our players, our coaches, our officials, and our spectators, and our administrators. It's going to touch the entire hockey community, as you said earlier.
Okay, thanks, Keith. And Kristen, I guess for you to add on a little bit, as you can see, there's a pretty good cross section of staff, volunteer leaders, coaches, officials, player development experts that are all on this task force. What have the discussions been like during the early stages? And what has been the awareness level of all the applicable issues of the members as they headed into this project?
Yeah, Matt, the assortment of people is quite interesting with a lot of different experience. And so our group, when we came to the table, what ended up happening at the beginning was a lot of discussion about how we got to where we are, right? What has been done on the officiating side? What have we done on the culture side? Why are we where we are today, right? We can't move forward unless we know what's happened and what's been tried and worked and didn't work. So we spent a good, at least a month, maybe 2 months, really getting to know what everyone on the group knew, right? What do you know? What do I know? And then from there, we started to be able to look forward, right? Looking forward to what we want our game to look like in the future and what we can do moving forward with some of the initiatives that Keith mentioned we're going to try to come up with.
Okay, and Keith, coming back to you, you're still very much in the gathering information stage. It's been a couple of months now, but without going into too many specifics, what are some of the primary bucket items that you've been able to identify that the group will start working on?
So we, as Kristen said, it took a little bit of conversations and probing into each one of our areas. And I think what we decided to do was develop a matrix made up what we'll call buckets. We'll call the 5 buckets. And the 5 buckets of discussion topics are recruiting, retention, education, professional interaction, and legislative enforcement. So recruiting is barriers to entry or barriers to re-entry. How do we recruit? How do we get more people involved? We're looking at, we have the 12 people just don't meet in a vacuum. We've asked many people to step into the room and sort of enlighten us on what's taking place, what's happening right now. I'm an official, I know, our education program very well, but we asked, of course, Matt and BJ to come in and join the conversation one afternoon to enlighten some of the other folks on the council or on the task force that, had no clue exactly what goes on, for a referee standpoint for the educational process. So we're looking at everything we possibly can. As I said to the executive committee when Mike first tapped us to do this, is we're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're gonna dig in where we can. Retention, we'll start talking about abuse of officials. We'll talk about scheduling challenges that are out there. On the educational side, we're talking about how we get coaches more educated on the rules of hockey. We all sit back here, we can kind of chuckle. Yeah, well, I haven't met a coach yet that knows the rules of hockey. And that's sort of true. And that's one reason why I became an official after coaching for 26 years. I decided one day to open up the rule book, and boy, did I learn a lot. And the first thing I learned is keep your mouth shut, because you didn't know enough of the rules of hockey. So we're trying to do a little cross-pollination of coaching and officiating education programs, where we think that that's some low-hanging fruit that we could probably make an instant change, and we have made a change already, actually, in the education program for coaches. So these are the 5 buckets that we're just kind of walking our way through. We're asking people, what their thoughts are. This last week, we had a sports psychologist come in and talk to us about player behavior, as well as spectator behavior and coaching behavior. So it was quite enlightening, and we learned from it. And there's a lot of things that we know will come out of that conversation. So, and again, the last item, I say professional interaction, communication, that works both ways. We always have to work on our communication skills. I don't care if you're an official talking to a coach, or a coach talking to an official, or a coach talking to players. That I think it's paramount. And again, the long lead item would be the legislative enforcement, the accountability, what we want to give over to the playing rules committee that we could change that will help impact the game. So again, no sunset for this, but some great conversations on what we need to do to make a culture change within our community.
Okay, and Kristen, you're in the field working with the youth clubs, including their coaches and hockey directors, on a pretty regular basis. What are they saying about the officiating situation, and how much has it impacted their programs?
So you always get a little bit of both with this, Matt. As you know, you've got some coaches that get it and they're compassionate, and you have some programs and coaches that are your typical grumblings, mostly about consistency and safety, and I don't get why they can't figure it out. There's not a lot of compassion there. And that comes back to some of the education pieces we've tried to implement to try to get them to understand more of what's going on. But I've really found that this year we've had way more compassion and concern for the officiating program and for our officials than ever before. Not only because of COVID and being out there officiating games during COVID, which is something that's different than in the past, but then also with the official shortage and the culture that we're working in right now. I've seen more people ask questions about how do we fix this? How do we get more officials involved? How can we help? Than in any other seasons before, when it was your typical, I'm going to say something negative about the officials and move on. So for me, that's really hopeful. That I think we've all heard stories about a bad coach or an angry parent or a missed call by an official. But I think we're maybe at a point where some of the things have gotten so out of hand in certain situations or in certain areas or at different times that people are more willing to see eye to eye to try to come up with solutions than we have been in the past, where it was just kind of the coaches would say, yeah, it is what it is. We get crappy officials all the time, which for those of us that have officiated, it's really not, that's not what it is. There's a lot more to it. We've already talked about mentorship and how difficult it is to get better as an official in the environment that they're put in. They don't have practice. Their games are practice. And some of that knowledge that we can give our coaches to help them understand that is helpful. But I think we're coming along, and there's a lot more concern than I've heard for the officiating community in previous seasons.
No, that is hopeful. And that's something that's good to hear, because I guess maybe one of the things we need to do is get their attention and realize that this is a partnership and working together for the betterment of the game. And hopefully, I've always been a firm believer that if we can get that local youth hockey club to have a vested interest in the success of the officials that work their games, that's a win-win for everyone. The game is a little bit better and the officials have a more positive experience and stuff like that. I know we had a couple things that came through the chat real quick. First and foremost, I'll let you, I know, Kristin, you've been on the curriculum committee on the coaches side a little bit. One of the questions is, how come the officials are the only ones that are required to take a rules exam? And I think, what I'll just, before I turn it to you, what I'll just say is that, the coaches have a ton of stuff that they have to be able to do for their education as well. And I know that that's a hot topic, but either one of you two want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I will. I'd like to. I think it's a great question. And I was always told never say, boy, that's a great question, because it diminishes all the other questions. But I will tell you, it's good because it's a great segue to what some of the findings that the task force came up with after just a few phone calls. And it was that cross-pollination of let's get the coaches to understand the rules better. And so the coaching education program has their continuing education credit that they have to do. And I believe, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think we're moving forward with the coaching education program credits, where they get a certain amount of credits if they take online modules that the referees have to take, which of course we know have those end of chapter quizzes that are so famous. And then, so there's a sort of a quiz component to that, for the person that had the question in the chat. And then there's also additional continuing education credits if a coach decides to take a level 1 clinic and get his crest or her crest. And they sort of satisfy those total units that they need. But it does a couple things. One, it opens their book, and they understand the game, I think, a little bit better. And as well as maybe someday they'd say, you know what, I'm done coaching and I'm going to start reffing. And that's exactly what happened to me. I took a team of 10-year-olds to a clinic a number of years ago, a level 1 reffing clinic. And that's when I really fell in love with reffing. And believe me, Rule 601 was my rule. I was a real, idiot behind the bench to the officials. So for me, it's changed quite a bit. But seeing what it did for me and knowing what we can do for other coaches out there, I think the continuing education credits that they're going to get, the understanding of the game and taking that testing component will help out tremendously.
Yeah, and Keith, to add to that, so we revamped all of our coaching education curriculum, both the in-person curriculum, the Zoom curriculum that we also do, and then also our online modules. And with that, we've included additional information with regard to the relationship between coaches and officials, But then in those online and in-person clinics, there is one of the 6 segments of each clinic devoted to a topic that relates to officiating. And this year it's body contact and body checking. And what does that rule look like? You get to watch cool video examples and decide if it's a penalty or not. And so there's this really good discussion amongst the coaches of having to look at the play like an official and what the rule actually says and how they would actually call it during a game. So trying to create that. And I know that we don't require them to take a test or to know the rules specifically. We do leave that to the officials, and we'll slowly try to incorporate more and more into some of the options that the coaches have. But I do agree with Matt. There is a lot for the coaches to learn about how to make sure those kids actually know how to play hockey and all the player development pieces that go into skating and shooting and team play and decision-making. And I could go on and on, but we have made a concerted effort so that the coaches are learning what it feels like to be in that seat watching a video clip that goes by like this and make a decision. They always ask, I promise you, they always ask, can we see that again? And depending on who's doing the clinic, sometimes we say yes and sometimes we say no. But it's definitely a learning experience for those coaches.
Yeah.
You know, Matt, I think it's important to just reinforce what Kristen said a bit earlier about the practice game ratio that we require a lot of the coaches to do for their players. You know, they're out there practicing on a Tuesday or Thursday evening, and then they play a game on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, or maybe both. And, you know, they're getting that practice time. Young officials, they go to the clinic, they take the test, they get their envelope in the mail and stick it on, and off they go. And there's no practice for them. So I think a lot of coaches have to understand, you know, that's why I think a mentorship program is critically important. The mentor program that USA Hockey has, I think we need to grow that in our areas, but also the fact that, you know, these kids jump out on the ice, you know, 14, 15-year-old kid, or maybe even older, and they don't have any practice. Their practice was maybe an hour, you know, wash out, drop the puck, you know, blowing off sides at a level 1 clinic, and they're ready to rock. So I think, you know, coaches and spectators alike should keep that in mind, that, you know, one reason why I did jump on the ice is I thought I had an impact to teach. You know, there's an element of my refereeing that, you know, you take time to explain to the kid what he just did wrong, and that's why there's a violation. And, you know, instead of just blowing your whistle saying 2 minutes in the box or whatever the case may be. So I think it's important that we reinforce what Kristen said earlier about that practice time.
Yep, very good. And I'll just touch on real quickly too. One of the questions that's come in is whether the local groups have done anything in regards to interviewing officials that leave. And why they leave and that type of thing. And one of the things the task force did is put together a survey that was sent out to basically every official who was registered with us the last 3 years and did not return. That data is still being collected and coming in. I can tell you that the early results is that it's a pretty even split between three different areas. Number one is other commitments, whether they're just older, they're 75 years old and they just, you know, have enough and health and jobs and school and family and those types of commitments, and including, you know, in some cases they learned through COVID that, you know what, there's other things that they could be doing on a weekend than spending 6 hours at a hockey rink. The second thing is lack of assignments and local politics and lack of opportunity. And then the third thing is the abuse issue that really came in. And then a pretty distant fourth was the registration requirements and the cost to get started and those types of things. But that is something that the task force is going to be looking at in terms of those results and using some of that data. But it does kind of sort of lead me into my next question here for Keith too, is that, you know, we've talked before about and recognize that officials have to look at themselves in the mirror and take some of the responsibility for the state that the game is in. What are some of the things officials can do to make their own officiating better and promote a more positive experience overall? And you've talked about, you know, the mentoring, you know, you mentioned the assigning. Is there anything else on the officiating side that we can do and ourselves to make things a little bit better?
Yeah, Matt, you know, I'm collecting videos, unfortunately, you know, of incidents that took place on the ice, you know, whether it be player on official, coach on official. But, you know, there's also a file that I have, and it's, official on, meaning, officials, we blow our gaskets every now and then. And unfortunately, some of these videos are not the ones, they're not the top 10. You really don't want to see them. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think from the official standpoint, it's an emotional game, and you're being challenged. You make the call, and the first thing you hear is maybe someone in the stands, maybe someone at the bench is chirping at you. I think what you need to do really is just sort of take a deep breath, relax, and because you need to be the person that manages the game. I know that some people are going to argue with that. I have no control over the players. I have no control over the coaches. I've always said the coaches control the players. They can push their buttons just by their mannerisms or their speech to other players and to the officials. So I think that if they take an opportunity in a game to just take a deep breath, calm everything down in their own mouth and head before they speak, their communication skills, I think, is probably the most critical point, in a game that they can sort of, build from that. When you walk away from a game and you have a disagreement with a coach, as long as it's a civil disagreement, you can agree to disagree and walk away. But it's when that thing escalates to a shouting, usually it doesn't go good after that. So, my advice really is to take that breath, relax. And I've had, believe me, a hot-headed Irishman. I've had to bite my tongue many, many times. And sometimes I didn't, and I regretted it. But I will tell you that the more times that I've taken that deep breath, had that conversation, civil conversation with a player and or a coach, it works out tremendously.
Okay. Kristen, back to the hockey community concept real quick. Where do the clubs and the local youth hockey leadership fit into the spectrum of the culture that is created around a youth hockey game? And I guess the follow up to that, what are some of the things they can do to build a stronger sense of community within that environment?
Yeah, we all can walk into a rink or a game and already know the environment that's going to be created, right? Whether it's a specific coach or that program, it's going to be awesome. You're like, oh, I love reffing blank program. It's great. Every time I go in there, it's just good. And other times, that with that program or specific coach, it's awful. You know what you're going to get every time. And that's all created from a culture, right? So whether the hockey director or the coach itself for that specific team has created a culture for their program. And sometimes it's a bad culture and sometimes it's a great culture. And we expect our hockey directors and our coaches to create the culture where there's mutual respect between the players, the coaches, the parents, and the refs. That positive player experience I'm talking about has to come from the adults. I always ask, would you want your kid to see another adult yell at an adult that either made a mistake or you're yelling at them because you didn't get their way? Is that the adult example that we want to show kids? No, we really don't. Like, that's not how we want kids to respond to adversity, right? We want them to learn to ask questions. We want them to learn that they're not always going to get their way, and there are mistakes. They make them all the time in a hockey game. I want to say we've accepted that kids might make a pass that causes a turnover or puck's going to go in the net. That's part of the game. And so the more that we can get our coaches to understand that, yes, a ref is not always going to make the call that they saw. It's not going to look how they want it to, but they should be focused on coaching their kids and speaking to that other adult or kid sometimes, right? You sometimes have an adult coach and a kid referee, and the language that we use is just not respectful. And then the parents, that comes down to the hockey director and the coach sitting down at the beginning of the season and saying, this is the culture. This is what I expect out of my coaches. This is what I expect out of our players and our parents. And you need to be, if you want to be part of this program, you need to be within that. And then the word that we all really kind of cringe at, but is the most important piece of it, is how do you hold everyone accountable to that culture you want to create? And sometimes that means calling people out. Making sure that they're in line with what that positive behavior is and trying to change it. But unfortunately, we don't see that all the time, right? Sometimes we let it run rampant. Sometimes it's just, oh, that's the way they coach. Oh, that team's parents are always crazy like that. Well, it comes back to a product of not creating a culture that creates the best experience for the officials and the players.
No, that's some great points. And one of the concepts that's kind of sort of floating around the chat here tonight too is, a little bit of the consistency and the fact that, we have differences in the rules. The NHL is different than the NCAA, which is different than High School Federation, which is different than USA Hockey. Well, the reality is that they all have different goals and objectives within their particular member type. So there's bound to be some things, but maybe that causes some of the confusion. But there's also inconsistency within regions or within, I think one of the terms one of the guys used was big city refs let things go, whereas the smaller towns tend to, call some things a little bit tighter and follow some of the guidelines and the expectations. How do we solve that program, or how do we solve that problem without the officiating community and the player community working together? Because I think that's really the key is that they both have to have that vested interest in the success of their programs to create that culture. Because the officials can't do it on their own, because if the coaches or the hockey director, that's the way that they want their club to play is dump, chip it up, chip it out, chip it out, chip it up, dump, bump, and leave a lump. If that's their style of play within the club, nothing the official is going to do is going to change that. So how do we get everyone working together towards that common culture and hopefully address some of those issues as it relates to consistency?
Yeah, Matt. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Well, I don't mean to step on you. Roger Guerrillo, one of our task force members, he said two things. Communicate, actually three things. Communicate, educate, legislate. That's what we need to do. We need to be better communicators. And I think that's, as I just indicated in my previous piece, we need to communicate well, but I think we need to communicate all the way through to help change this culture, to get everybody working together jointly. And I think it's all part of, educating and communicating is where the rubber meets the road, is what you're trying to say, Matt. I think that's what we need to do. Kristen?
Yeah, I agree, Keith. You took pretty much what I was going to say. And I just think it's important that the player development side, it takes time. I mean, we just came out with different body checking interpretations. Well, it's not going to be immediate that the coaches are able to coach those kids how to play the game that way to minimize penalties, and that the officials are going to learn to officiate those new rules and be consistent. I saw the comment about an officiating instructor maybe not saying they would call that. Like, that's where that responsibility on the officiating community comes, but it comes on our coaching community as well to coach the game to the rules as well. And that takes time. I remember when the NHL took out a lot of the stick fouls the first season, there were a lot of penalties and a lot of angst amongst everyone. It took several seasons for even the best officials with the best players and the best coaches to do it. And we are in one of those periods of time where we've created a change, and it's going to take a little bit of time for everybody to get on board. But those coaches that don't get on board, their kids will be behind player development wise. Their kids are going to be in the box, so competitively. And then we go back to who's holding them accountable to that, hopefully hockey directors and parents.
Yep. Okay. And kind of sort of following along those same lines, I've kind of had this old saying, Keith, that the game tends to run smoother when coaches coach, players play, and officials officiate. It is when one or more of those groups tends to involve themselves in a different role that generally causes the game to go off the rails. So what are your thoughts on how we can encourage these groups to trust each other, to do their own role, while also encouraging that they are in this thing together and need each other to achieve that common goal, which is to create the most positive hockey environment?
Okay, there's a lot there to unpack. We really do. We have to stay in our lanes, number one. And I think one of the hardest things that I had when I first moved from the dark side, become an official, sorry, Kristen, was, the fact that I was not a coach anymore, and that I was refereeing games and sort of calling games, through the eyes of a coach. And what I needed to do was be an official, because that's what I was. I was an official. I was no longer a coach in that instance. While I did do some overlapping coaching and ref at the same time, I did not, when I was on the ice as an official, I needed to be an official. And I think we need to have that trust. Now, I don't have the answer, Matt, and neither does the task force singularly. That's why we're connected. The 12 of us are going to try to come up with some of these answers and work together for them. But I think if we have trust in the coaching education program and what the coaches need to learn, and we have our trust in our administrators to do what they need to do to provide, I think, the accountability and the backing for the officials and the coaches, for that matter, with the spectators, and I use that term spectators, / parents. I think if everybody understands their role in our hockey community and respects each other's role and trust each other, I think at the end of the day, it's going to take a while, but we're going to get there. And if everybody sort of stays in their lane and provides that trust, that may solve some of the issues that we have.
I serve on ACES, which is the Association of Amateur Sports Associations, and leadership. And we have a working group or a subgroup on officiating. So every 3 months, once a quarter, we get together on a Zoom with officiating leaders from several of the other governing bodies in all kinds of sports, everything from rodeo to sailing to fencing to everything that's involved. And there's a lot of people looking at USA Hockey right now, and they're aware of what we're trying to accomplish and to put together the task force. And I know I've already had some people reach out to me asking, what exactly are we doing, and are we making any progress, and those types of things. And we realize it's going to take some time. And it's certainly an extremely complicated process. And as you're learning, it's a very dynamic thing with some significant challenges. So I'm going to put Kristen on the spot here. You've been involved in many of the different facets of the game. They all have to come together ultimately to make this culture change work. How confident are you that USA Hockey will be a leader and are going to be able to pull this off and let some of the other bodies learn from us and use some of the stuff that we come up with as well?
I'm really confident, Matt, only because we've done it before. I think that there's a lot of people that have seen USA Hockey be a leader with the American development model and how we develop players. USA Hockey used science and different player development and human development experts to come in and tell us how to do that. And we were the first ones to do it. And then it was adopted by the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee for all other sports, right? So we did it there. We're a leader when it comes to coach and officiating education across all sports, right? Our programs are really, really good. They exist for all coaches and officials, which has made our game safer, which has made our players better. Parent modules. I know, Jim Clare, you asked in the chat about what are we doing about parent education? And we just are in the process and almost done with parent education modules, which will be free and available for associations to use and provide to their parents, and us at USA Hockey will provide those. And those activities, well, first, the parent education model, I promise, has stuff about being great and great spectators and being respectful to the officials. We wouldn't have left that out in the culture we create. But all of those things happen because the different departments at USA Hockey, the different volunteer groups within our board at USA Hockey work together, right? We have lots of meetings at USA Hockey where we have staff and volunteers with a variety of experience and expertise that work together. And this is no different. We have a really good task force put forth with a really large challenge, but I do know that we've already, as Keith talked about, came up with one idea with the initiation of the coaching education, continuing education credits. There are more to come. So for me, yes, I work at USA Hockey, and I say this anyway, just because we have done some really great things. So we're capable and we're already to task on it. And the people that are putting their minds together to do it, we're going to do what we can to change the culture, but we can't do it alone. Like, our task force can't fix the culture of youth sports. That's a little daunting. We've talked about it, the pie in the sky options, but we're going to try, but we're going to need a lot of people to get on board with us to do that.
Yep. Keith, anything to add on that?
Yeah. One of the first things we looked at in the task force was our peer groups and the other organizations out there across the country, youth organizations. And while we're not alone with struggling with officials, I will tell you that one thing that was apparently clear, and Chris has just said it, is USA Hockey, without a doubt, is the leader on many of these fronts for the exact reasons that Kristin had mentioned. The coaching education program, how we train our officials, how we train our coaches, how we develop our players. USA Hockey is so far out in front of the other national governing bodies that we wanted to try to team or pool with these other groups to see if they had any remedies that they may have already looked at, and they didn't. Some had similar problems, but we were so far out in front with a lot of the programs that we've already put in place that Kristen just demonstrated that we're sort of walking down this road by ourselves. And I think others will learn from what we are going to learn and what we're going to institute to change the culture within our game.
Okay, thank you for that. One other question, just or comment from the audience here is I'd like to see zero tolerance for the coaches, but fans, I'm not sure how that is going to be enforced. I think one of the things that, if you notice, we updated the zero tolerance policy in 2019 at the annual Congress, and one of the things that we updated with was taking a little bit of a stronger stance as it related to coaches and players, but more importantly, we made a recommendation to youth hockey clubs that every team appoint a spectator monitor that's available at every game. There's someone that's designated at every game to ultimately be able to manage the spectator, not manage, but certainly monitor the spectators and hopefully address any issues that come up long before it gets to the point where it's impacting what's happening out on the ice between the boards and between the glass. So I think I can't speak on behalf of the task force, but I would imagine that that type of a concept is probably being discussed, and it wouldn't be far-fetched to see that type of a directive come down the road at some point here in the future.
Matt, also that we mentioned as our out report at the winter meeting a few weeks ago, some affiliates and districts have already taken on a website that they could. I don't want it to be like Big Brother's watching you, or you're dropping a dime on your neighbor. But if Mr. Jones, and don't mean to offend anybody with their last surname Jones on the call, but is in the stands and he's screaming and yelling and not acting appropriately, they could go and to their affiliate website and say, you may want to have a chat with Mr. Jones. He's a little on the edge during the squirt game Sunday afternoon. So. And we've already seen some results of that. I know some affiliates that have had that in place, and since they instituted it, their problem in the stands has dropped tremendously. So people just know that thing is hanging out there, and I think it's sort of a behavioral change that's taken place. So there are some other things that we'll be making recommendations on, but that's one that we would highly encourage affiliates and districts to put on their websites. Okay.
Very good. So we're coming up to the top of the hour here. And I think one thing I can probably say with quite a bit of certainty is that our audience tonight and those that will maybe come watch it on demand at a later time is probably a group that's pretty fully invested in terms of what we're talking about with the hockey community. So any final words of wisdom that you have for our audience in terms of what they can do and what they can look for moving forward?
Ladies before gentlemen.
Knew that was going to happen, Keith. No, I think the biggest thing for those of you that are on this Zoomcast that are in the officiated communities, continue to work towards that consistency. I think that was a lot of the conversation in the chat about how the rules are interpreted differently, how they're instructed differently, but also the comments that all the materials and the rule book is one and the same when it comes to those USA Hockey games. So how can you help you and your fellow officials be the best officials possible and hold each other accountable to those rules and interpretations as you were taught them or as you read them, I think is really the most we can ask from the officiating community as we work on what the rest of the culture looks like that impacts you.
I have to agree, and I would say that we don't have the answers. We're going to work collectively as a community you know, the people on this call, as well as the people who you touch every day in your hockey community, to come up with the answers and to change. We have to change. We have to change for our community. We have to change for our kids. You know, I started this so many years ago, and this is coaching kids in hockey because I do it for the kids. And today I do it for the kids. And if we want to keep this game alive in the hearts and minds of our kids, we have to change the culture, and we have to have mutual respect for all participants. And I think it starts here and it continues, but we're going to collectively solve this problem.
Okay, thanks, Keith. I'm going to go into share my screen here real quick and do my obligatory push for the upcoming episodes and stuff like that, which I'm obligated to do by BJ. Here's the upcoming schedule. Is tonight, obviously we talked about the hockey community. Episode 54 in 2 weeks is BJ will be back, I believe, with another You Make the Call. Episode 55 will be an IIHF event special. Not sure what we have in mind there, but I think it may involve a few of our Olympic officials as they come back and just kind of sort of filling everyone in on the IIHF and what's going on there. And then episode 56 on March 15th, we're going to get into a very important issue and something that I think you're going to hear a lot more about coming up here in regards to the local assigners and those types of things. Reminder to follow us on social media, the Twitter and Instagram and usahockey.com. And you can go back and watch any of the previous 52 episodes along with this one on the Zoomcast page through USA Hockey's YouTube channel. And reminder that BJ generally sends out a survey to all the participants with trying to gather some feedback and get some information. So we appreciate if you take a few minutes and complete that when that comes out your way. Finally, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It was some very good dialogue and a lot of good stuff coming through the chats and some good questions. And also want to certainly thank K&K, Keith and Kristen here for taking time out of their busy schedules. They are two of the people that we enjoy working with the most within the officiating program, that are always willing to give back to us and have been a active part of our officiating program for a long time, but they're still very much a part, and we appreciate them taking time from their busy schedules to join us tonight. So again, thank you for your continued dedication and commitment to USA Hockey and for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the evening and hopefully stay warm and stay safe. And let's make sure the last month and a half, 2 months of this season is our best season ever. So again, thank you very much. And we'll see you at the rink sometime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much, Matt. Kristen, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Good night, everyone.